Hello, I'm from Florida International University, and today I'm going to be discussing a meta-analytic clustering approach that was used to dissociate activation and behavior profiles across reward processing data. So reward processing is a complex and heterogeneous construct, as I'm sure you guys all know, and it involves multiple elemental operations. These often include encoding sensory stimuli, assigning value to stimuli, learning outcome contingencies, and adapting behavior and making choices that can maximize desired outcomes. So neuroimaging experiments often utilize complex tasks, and therefore it might be difficult to associate specific brain regions with these distinct aspects of reward processing. So in an effort to elucidate brain regions and in turn networks that are consistently involved in reward processing, we applied an emergent meta-analytic clustering approach to a large body of results archived in an extensive neuroimaging repository. The goals of this analysis were to organize reward processing experiments into meta-analytic groupings based on their similar patterns of activation, and then to characterize cognitive and behavior profiles that were associated with each of these meta-analytic groupings. To these aims, we performed a meta-analytic k-means clustering analysis that organized experiments based on their similarity in activation patterns. We started by extracting activation coordinates that were archived under the paradigm classes reward, gambling, delay discounting, and classical conditioning in the BrainMap database. This resulted in 712 experiments from 177 studies involving 2,306 subjects. We then functionally coded each of these experimental contrasts with terms through a multi-rater blind procedure. These terms were based on the publicly available information in the published articles under the methods and supplementary material sections, and also the BrainMap metadata. These terms represented the cognitive and behavioral constructs that the tasks included in our sample were trying to investigate. So we used this coding schema to get at kind of more precise reward domain-specific constructs. We then took the activation coordinates and created model activation images for each experiment. These images were then reconstructed into an experiment by voxel one-dimensional vector, and these vectors were used to compute an experiment-by-experiment cross-correlation matrix. We then performed k-means clustering to iteratively cluster this matrix into different grouping solutions based on a 1 minus r distance or the strength of correlation. Experiments were grouped in a way that maximized between group differences of experiment correlation distributions and minimized within group differences of experiment correlation distributions. We then determined the optimal clustering solution based on majority rule of 4 different stability metrics. In this case, the optimal solution was 4 groupings. And then finally, we performed a activation likelihood estimation meta-analysis for each grouping to compute the significant conversion activation. So these are the resulting co-activation meta-analytic groupings. You see the first in purple mostly consists of striatal regions and the anterior cingulate cortex, while the second in orange involves the hippocampus, amygdala, presensory motor area, and a little bit of the insula. And the third in blue corresponds with some accounts of the default mode network involving the medial prefrontal cortex extending into the orbital frontal cortex and also the posterior cingulate. While the fourth in green corresponds with accounts of the executive control network involving multiple frontal regions, including the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex and also the inferior parietal cortex and a little bit of the thalamus. So we then wanted to map behavior profiles to each of these meta-analytic groupings. So we performed exploratory functional decoding analyses. We first performed a within-group consistency analysis. So for each group, we found the terms in that group that were higher represented in it than would be expected given that group's mean term frequency. We then performed an across-group selectivity analysis that for each term found the group or groupings that was higher represented in than would be expected given that term's frequency in all other groupings. A term was considered to be significantly associated with a grouping if it survived a 0.05 corrected p-value threshold from either analysis because both analyses provided important information. The within-group consistency analysis was not as influenced by the number of experiments in each grouping, but was influenced by a term's overall frequency across the sample. Whereas the across-group selectivity analysis was not as influenced by the term's overall frequency in the sample, but was influenced by the number of experiments in each grouping. So these are the resulting terms that were significantly and positively associated with each grouping. You see those outlined in blue were significant from the within-group analysis, those outlined in red were significant from the across-group analysis, and those outlined in black were significant from both. You see 7 terms in the middle that were significantly and positively associated with all 4 groupings, and we refer to this as the common reward processing behavior profile. We didn't find it that surprising that there was some overlap in terms associated with the groupings, as all of these groupings were derived from experiments involving reward processing. So I'll now discuss the unique behavior profiles of each of these groupings and offer interpretations that were based on the term definitions and existing literature, but because this study was data-driven, these interpretations are still up for further discussion. So this first grouping in purple was significantly and positively associated with the terms reward omission, anticipation, and classical conditioning. It might be suggestive of reward prediction error encoding, which calculates a signal that shows the difference between an expected outcome and an actual outcome, and is a key component in very well-studied reward prediction error learning models. Whereas this meta-analytic grouping in orange was significantly associated with the terms delay discounting and delay, and might be suggestive of this temporal parameter that's also often included in reward prediction error learning models that discounts reward predictions based on a wait time or delay until an outcome. So together, both of these groupings might be involved in evaluating information about reward or outcome delivery and the wait time or delay until that delivery. These 2 groupings at the bottom were both significantly associated with terms suggestive of reward learning, specifically reversal learning, prediction uncertainty, and reward learning. So they might be involved in adapting behavior to maximize desired outcomes. However, their unique behavior profiles suggest possible dissociated learning strategies. This meta-analytic grouping in blue that corresponds with some accounts of the default mode network was associated with terms suggestive of subjective valuation, like reward price and face attractiveness, but also terms suggestive of spatial navigation, like the predator-prey paradigm and moving through a maze. Together, this grouping might be suggestive of reward learning that requires more internally focused attention or self-reflective thought. This last meta-analytic grouping in green was associated with the terms pattern recognition, rewarded performance, and risk, and might be suggestive of being involved in reward learning that requires more task-driven attention or externally focused attention. So overall, these meta-analytic results add value by providing a data-driven parcellation of reward processing experiments. Further, our more comprehensive inclusion criteria of experiments in our sample compared to other meta-analyses investigating reward processing allowed us to look at functional patterns that might be relatively overlooked in the reward processing literature, but are nonetheless consistently involved. Further, our behavior profiles seem to correspond with distinct steps in well-studied reward prediction error learning models that describe gathering and evaluating information about outcome delivery and the wait time until that delivery, and then using that information to adapt behavior to maximize desired outcomes. Further, we are able to expand on these models by providing one account of how the default mode network and executive control network might be integrated during reward learning. Overall, our methodological approach displayed its potential to integrate and dissociate brain activation patterns during complex cognitive processes across a large body of neuroimaging experiments. So I'd like to thank all those that contributed to this work and invite anyone who wants to know more about this project to visit my poster, which is 1428. Thank you.
We have a couple of minutes for 2 questions, maybe. I'm wondering, your third and fourth components seem to map relatively closely to networks, but the first and the second didn't, and I wonder what the first and the second component could potentially teach us about networks, if at all.
Yeah, that's a great question. I agree. I think they were more reward-specific groupings than the last two, which might be more suggestive of things that are involved in lots of different neuroimaging tasks. Because reward processing tasks, while they have, of course, that one contrast that's distinctly like reward versus neutral, reward versus punishment, that's getting at a very precise how your brain responds to reward. They also involve other aspects, like, in gambling tasks or any task where you need to do some kind of performance. There's going to be like different aspects of executive control or like possibly memory processes that we don't, usually distinctly think of as reward processing, but are often involved in those reward processing tasks. And our sample included all aspects of these tasks, so we were able to kind of look at the specific reward domain activation possibly, and then some more like general task activated areas.